And joining us now is the former Defense Secretary under President Trump, Mark Esper. Secretary, thanks so much for being here. I think everybody agrees, President Biden, members of Congress, the war court, that Putin is a war criminal. But what do we do about it? What does anybody do about it?
Sure. Well, first, we need to help Ukraine win this war. And there are a number of things we need to do there and continue to do, such as providing arms and ammunition and assistance. But look, at the same time, we have to continue to account for these war crimes, gather evidence as we can across the battlefields in Ukrainian cities, talking to Ukrainian victims and survivors, and doing all those things, because at some point, this war will end and there needs to be a reckoning, and people need to be held accountable to history for what has happened in that country.
You know, the House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, a Republican, said that one of the reasons he held today's hearing was to convince members of his own caucus not to cut funding to Ukraine. A real divide currently exists in the Republican Party on this. What would happen, in your opinion, if the United States were to cut back or cut entirely future aid to Ukraine?
Well, he's right. There are a few members on the GOP side. I think it's a small minority that think we shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be helping the Ukrainians. We should be focused elsewhere. And I think that's an incorrect view, of course. But look, if the United States isn't there, if we don't lead, I fear that the Western support will fall apart. The United States leadership is critical. We brought together the NATO alliance to provide arms and ammunition. We brought in other Western democracies such as Australia and Korea and Japan. And we are the glue that holds it all together and is driving this car, if you will. So if we step back, I'm afraid others will step back, particularly at a time when we actually need more people to step up and do more to assist the Ukrainians.
In the meantime, the accused document leaker, Jack Teixeira, appeared in court today, and this is as Secretary of Defense Austin orders a complete review of all military security processes by May 2nd, very quickly. The Biden administration says we still don't know how much was leaked or how much damage was done, but the U.S. and its allies keep saying that many of these documents were altered. Who do we think altered them? It wasn't this 21-year-old enlisted airman, was it?
Who knows? I mean, this is one of the two or three things that I said we need to find out immediately, and that is, what is the scope and scale of this release? And as you see this information trickle out every day, it seems we don't know what the limit of, and it's damaging on multiple levels. But you're right. Look, there is evidence, and people in the administration have admitted some of the documents have been doctored. I wouldn't put it past that maybe there's a disinformation campaign out there. Who knows? Maybe the Russians slipped information into this website. We just don't know. That's why we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to figure out how he did it. And then, of course, we need to find out who else is involved. You know, is there foreign influence all the way to the other end of the spectrum? Is the chain of command negligent? Were they responsible? Were they not doing their job?
For example, one report from one of those documents is that people in Turkey, a NATO ally, were meeting with the Wagner Group, Putin's private paramilitary, about possibly selling them weapons to use in Ukraine. I mean, that would be astounding if true, wouldn't it?
Well, that's one of the few astounding reports. I wouldn't put it past Wagner for trying to do that. If I recall, the report said that the Turks were turning that down. But look, there are other astounding things in there. What concerns me most are the revelations that we penetrated Russian military and the FSB, and we're getting a lot of information from them. And the fact that they now know that tells me they're probably plugging up those gaps and leaks, and that's going to hurt us, hurt Ukraine on the battlefield.
Finally, another one of those leaked documents shows that China is close to deploying a supersonic spy drone called the WZ-8. The Washington Post reports that documents show it travels 3 times the speed of sound and would dramatically strengthen China's ability to spy. That's got to be a little alarming.
Yes, alarming. I'm more concerned about it in an operational scenario where a plane that flies that high and that fast can reach out into the Western Pacific, the Middle Pacific, and look at U.S. military installations in Hawaii and Guam and try and find our carrier battle groups and do all the things they need to do to conduct what we call intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance on the movement and disposition of United States forces and allied forces. So, look, that's one of the things that we probably wouldn't have wanted the Chinese to know that we knew, and now they do. This is where the harm comes in and why we need to know, again, the full scale and scope of this young airman's release.
Wow. All right. Secretary Mark Esper, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.